What surprise is due to hit the AFC? Now I'm forgetting what division it is. I'm flashing back to the early 90s. It's the AFC North. What surprise is due to hit us there? Plus, what surprise is due to hit us with the AFC West quarterback play that I know is going to affect me in a lot of leagues, and I'm sure a lot of FFPC leagues as well. And Jameson Williams, yes, no, maybe, we're not sure. We're going to unpack that tonight on the Fantasy Football Players Championship High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with Brad Whitten, the 14th place team in the FFPC main event heading into Week 8. We've got a great show for you. I'm here. Ferrell Elliott is here from the KFFSC. Stick around. Your High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour starts right now.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture, are we not all our father's sons? I became a man, nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you to all the Ferrelliacs and Bulkaholics tuning in tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Welcome in. It is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship at myffpc.com. I am Eric Balkman, your host at Eric Balkman on the X. You can follow me on Twitter or on the X there. And you can also check me out at the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. We have a Boffo show for you tonight. I know it is it's a big week for a lot of you out there. No teams on bye in Week 8. Everybody is loading up to try to get to the championship round of both the FFPC main event and the Fantasy Pros Championship here, as we're coming up on crunch time in that. And we're going to bring you Brad Whitten, the 14th place team owner in the FFPC main event. He's going to join us in about, I would say about 12 minutes or so. And then, of course, you'll get the expertise of one of my favorite people in the industry and a guy that has won a boatload of cash in the FFPC, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football and the high stakes honcho over at the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship that you can check out at kffsc.com. Welcome in, Ferrell Elliott. Ferrell, welcome in, man. So glad to have you aboard tonight. How's it going here on this final fantasy football weekend of October?
It's wonderful. I'm glad that you've announced me as winning a boatload of cash. But for honesty and journalism, that boat was there's like one that the kids would play with in the bathtub. That's the size of the boat. I have not been as successful as our friend Brad, who will join us tonight. And, I think it takes something significant to be through 7 weeks in the top 100 of the FFPC. It's a wonderful place to play from. And it'll be interesting to learn how you got there and more importantly, how he's going to stay.
I think that's the issue, because we can look back on drafts. We can look back on everything that's happened from the course of the early September to now late October. The next time we do this show, Ferrell, will be in early November. We are all trying to chase this. Well, not me, but we're all trying to chase this $1 million grand prize in the FFPC main event. We're trying to chase this $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship. And I think when I'm crafting questions every week for our guests, I always want to bring up the draft, but I don't think that's as important as it was in late August and early September. So I try to focus on stuff that is tangible for everybody else at this point in the season. But Brad had a fantastic draft. He has had a fantastic first 2 months in the Fantasy Football Players Championship main event. A guy that has, I don't want to say he was leading the whole thing, but I think he was close. He's in 14th place heading into Week 8, and that's a great spot to be in. Ferrell, as a guy who is a veteran of this, like, where do you want to be at this last weekend in October? I think like you just want to be in contention, and you'll let the chips fall where they may. But I think the important thing is just to be in the mix at this point. And I think that you can carry that over to a 6 or 7 figure grand prize at this point.
That 1 through 4 designation in your division makes you, or in your league, makes you feel very, very good. If the playoffs ended today, you're in. Now, one of the things that I always do if I don't have a team there, I'm searching to see how many points am I out of that 4th spot, and can I make an argument for how my team can get there? And just, I think at this point in time, and one of the things that you want to do is not hold back, to go ahead and enjoy the risk. We advised last week, unless you have a player at running back that can get you 12 plus and has a high ceiling, skip the idea of playing a running back just off the waiver wire that you're uncertain about. If you have Christian McCaffrey, gamble and wait. And the people that did that were paid off significantly for waiting. So, let's stand strong and keep sawing the wood, my friend.
I think that it's important to give you props on that, because I was a little skittish on waiting on McCaffrey on Monday Night Football at this point last week. You said keep the faith, don't take a 0, or you were willing to take a 0 in the right circumstance, Ferrell.
Don't live in fear, Balky. I had a 9-man team that scored the best it scored all year in this past week, because I did the poor. My maladroit system of working free agency foiled me. Let's just put it that way. So yes,
it happens.
And so it's not going to kill you to go to war with 9.
And quite frankly, like, McCaffrey really rewarded his owners, not only with 1 touchdown to keep that streak alive against the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football, he got a second one as well, and it was fantastic. And I think we always talk about this, like we do the show at a weird time every week, Friday night. Yes, we have the Friday injury reports, but stuff could come out on Saturday. Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport are always breaking stuff on Sunday morning. So I think there's something to be said for, holding out hope until that very last minute, at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, when those inactives are announced. Like, you want to hold out hope as long as you can. It certainly paid off for the McCaffrey owners. And I'll tell you what, it could pay off for another running back, not in the NFC, but the AFC, as we switch to the fantasy flash here. I am blown away by this. Jerome Ford, according to Adam Schefter, as of about 9 hours ago, is listed as questionable against the Seahawks, as he is going from the mistake by the Malake in Lake Erie in Cleveland, going to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Schefter says Ford surprised the Browns coaches with how well he ran yesterday.
Really?
He has a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprain to me means like multiple weeks at a minimum. And apparently Ford might be able to play against Seattle this week. You think about Kareem Hunt, you think about the other aspects of the Cleveland Browns offense, given that PJ Walker is probably going to be the starting quarterback there this week, as Deshaun Watson is already out. I don't know how to deal with this, as far, like, for me, Ferrell, like, I have Kareem Hunt in a couple of leagues. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll play him this week. I think he's going to be okay. But now if Ford plays, this throws a massive monkey wrench into the situation. Not only do I not know what to do with Jerome Ford, I don't know what to do with Kareem Hunt against Seattle this weekend. What say you? What should we be doing in the KFFSC main event, the Fantasy Football Players Championship main event, and the Fantasy Pros Championship?
I'll say to my good friend Dominique here, who's coined a new phrase. I kind of like that, like in the chat room. What I'm going to do is probably look elsewhere, not because I can't figure out the situation, because I think I have. And what I figured out is Seattle is a very, very difficult defense to run against. They're even more difficult at home. They were shredded early on in the season, and since then, that defense has bolted down. Had a lot to do with Adams coming back, I believe. If I have Hunt, that's the player that I'm going to lean to. I think Pierre Strong's activity on the field last week was more games, game script, as they call it, the nature of the unscripted nature of the game and the way that the score presented it. So we're in a situation where I think Hunt gets most of the percent of snaps on the field, gets the action, and is the better pass catcher of the trio of backs or the duo of backs if the other back doesn't go.
So, right. And to that point, so if you have, as we speak here at 10:11 p.m. on Friday night, Ferrell, are you saying if you have Jerome Ford, you have to find a better option? Because right now I have Jerome Ford in a lot of leagues.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be nice to be able to deploy him, but understanding that every piece of information we get for the remainder of the weekend it's in the minutia, right? Like
you've got a better option because you didn't draft Jerome Ford. You acquired him on waivers.
No, I didn't draft him.
You acquired him on waivers, and you've got a better option.
So my point is here, let's say we roll into 11:30 on Sunday and we find out that Jerome Ford is active, and we get excited as Jerome Ford owners, but I think like cooler heads should prevail here. And at this point, we're like, we understand that while Ford might play, it might not be a workload high enough for us to be able to trust him in your lineups. And even if Ford's active, you're saying look elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and the game is in Seattle, so when are you going to find out if he's available?
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's a tantalizing thing to think about Ford being active, but at the same time, you have to understand reality, and reality might dictate Jerome Ford on your bench, at least for week 8. We'll find out with week 9.
You should have listened to Terp and drafted Pollard in the first round. That's exactly what you should have done because hey, Balky, I got a couple questions for you. How old is Christian McCaffrey? Top of your head.
I would say 25 years old. Am I wrong?
He's 27. How old is Ezekiel?
Jesus. Ezekiel Elliott's got to be coming up on age 29.
Yeah, he's 28, but he might be coming up on 29. It's interesting about the Pollard thing, and I'm a big Pollard fan. I gave him away for a first round draft pick on a moribund Dynasty team.
At what point did you make this trade?
A couple weeks ago. But
I will give you a round of applause for that. I think.
Well, and I think the team that took him needed another running back, and they're not going to get one probably better than him. But we say on this show often, why don't they play the other guy? The other guy's got all the juice, and we heard this nowhere was this better exemplified than the Elliott Pollard situation. And I'm fans of both players. If you take a look at Pollard's stats this year, Ezekiel last year, 3.8 yards a carry. Pollard through the season this year, 3.9 yards a carry, 7 yards per catch, only 2 TDs. And, from a fantasy perspective, at this time last year, Ezekiel had 6 TDs. My point is that it is always, and this goes back to our Jerome Ford and what we're talking about with Kareem Hunt, it's always good to be supporting the guy. But when you are the guy playing a tough team on the road with a backup quarterback, it's a tough call. Let's just look for better options.
Speaking of better options and speaking of quarterbacks, this is something that I'm battling this week. Ferrell, in all my Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship leagues, which I encourage you to play at kffsc.com, I have a ton of teams, and not a ton, that's an exaggeration. I have a significant amount of teams where I carry 2 quarterbacks, and they are as follows: Brock Purdy and Justin Fields. Mm-hmm. As a result, I have had to make some adjustments to my team to try to acquire a third quarterback this week. I was talking with in my local fantasy football show I do here in Northeast Wisconsin. Somebody asked me, like, Balky, you have Fields and you have Purdy. There's not a lot of quarterbacks out there. I said, well, I went after Gardner Minshew in a couple leagues. I got him in a few leagues. We'll see what happens there. There were some other, like Bryce Young. I like the matchup this week. We're going to get in that Panthers-Texans game coming up later in the show. So I got Bryce Young. I got Gardner Minshew. We'll see what happens. But obviously, I want to be able to play Brock Purdy this week. Mm-hmm. According to Kyle Shanahan, there is one hurdle that Brock Purdy has to leap over in order to clear the NFL's concussion protocol. They are hopeful, the Niners are, that he is going to do it for tomorrow. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's say he doesn't. Brock Purdy misses week 8. He does not play this week. What do we do? Not only with, I mean, obviously you can't play Purdy and you got to dumpster dive at quarterback, but you think about some of these other, calls that we have to make here. Brandon Ayuk, I think is probably the biggest call. If Sam Darnold is tossing the rock for the 49ers this week, are we deploying Brandon Ayuk? Like, what are we doing with these skill position players? You can make a case for George Kittle. Obviously, you're going to be playing Christian McCaffrey because he's a stud. But I think Ayuk is interesting. If Purdy doesn't play, does Ayuk become a sit for you in your lineups this week?
Oh, absolutely not, Balky. You're going to start every one of your 49ers just like you regularly would.
Even if it's Sam Darnold.
Even if it's Sam Darnold, and you are not dumb. I have objection to the phrase dumpster dive from a broadcast professional like you. But because I love you, I'm going to erase it like it never happened. He never said it. Let's talk about Sam Darnold. You want to talk about Sam Darnold? Okay, yes. Let's continue our trivia night here on FFPC. How many games in the NFL has Sam Darnold started?
Let's say 13. I don't know.
You don't have a clue. 55 games this guy has started.
Whoa!
He started 6 games last year for Carolina at the end of the season when nobody was paying attention. He took that team to 4-2 in the games he started. He had a 350-yard game. I think it was at Tampa Bay. I know it was against Tampa Bay. Threw 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Sam Darnold is getting it. And Sam Darnold is in a position to make a big difference for himself and for this team. Brock Purdy's a very good quarterback, a young quarterback. How many games has he started? Probably right at 13 or less. Darnold will be fine, and they will execute their entire offense with him. They don't have to dumb down the playbook. He's surrounded by superior skill position players and an excellent offensive line. He will throw the ball well from a clean pocket. And that's the quarterback. If you want to play Purdy, that's the quarterback you need to go get on the waiver wire. If Purdy doesn't go, you've got your answer right at game time.
January 1st, 2023, the first day of the new year this past year, Sam Darnold went down to Tampa Bay. 23 of 37, 341 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, a quarterback rating of 108.1. They lost the game, but certainly it was not because of Sam Darnold. There is something to be said for that. Anybody who is thinking about deploying George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, put them out there right now. Now, Ferrell, let's take this one. And I know we got our guest is coming up, Brad Whitten, and I want to get to him in a second. But let's take this one step further. Juwan Jennings, a guy who's been collecting targets like it's a bodily function in San Francisco. Does he become a flex in the KFFSC? Does he become a secondary flex in the FFPC, knowing how involved he has been in with Kyle Shanahan's offense, with or without Brock Purdy, becomes irrelevant? What do you do with Juwan Jennings if Sam Darnold's at quarterback this week?
You're tempted to play this player, but I don't know how you got there. How many teams do we have on bye this weekend?
0.
There you go.
0.
So last weekend, yes. This weekend, probably no. Probably no this weekend, Balky, because you just don't have the need. But it's a player that if he's not rostered in your league, you probably should get him rostered in your league. And you might say, well, other receivers, Samuel's coming back. It doesn't matter. If you can get a talented, and this player is a talent. I like a lot of things about him, but if you can get a talented member of this team for a just-in-case situation as we move into week 13 and some bigger bye weeks that are very important to us in the FFPC, then he's a player that I'd like to have on my roster. But not this week. You can do that.
And I think there's something to be said for that. And I think with one, we got the waiver wire coming up in the KFFSC tomorrow night at midnight. We got the waiver wire coming up in the FFPC 10 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday. So, based on what we have said, what we think, you can use that knowledge to your advantage or not. Trust me, knowing Ferrell Elliott, you are better off using that information to your advantage. Speaking of to your advantage, let's talk about a guy that who is going to dispense some fantasy knowledge tonight. that is going to help you for the second half of the season. A guy who has been a longtime player in high-stakes fantasy football, including the FFPC, a guy who sits 13 spots behind the number one spot in the FFPC main event heading into week 8 for a $1 million grand prize. A guy that we are going to pick his brain tonight, figure out how he got his team to this level, how he's going to continue to keep his team at this level, and how this team could be cashing a 7-figure grand prize come a couple of months from now. Well, please welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, Brad Whitten, the 14th place team owner in the FFPC main event. Brad, welcome in tonight. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Brad, what is that logo on your cap, which is being worn backwards? What is?
Yeah, so it's Nuggets. So that's my team.
Oh,
World
God
champs.
bless you.
Well,
what are we going to do?
I'm a 49er fan, and so the last couple weeks have been a little hard on me emotionally. So I had to switch to the Nuggets hat for a few days here. Hopefully this week things get back on track.
Nuggets and Niners. Why not?
All right, so hold on. So I want to flesh some stuff out here at the top. So you're a Niners fan. We will get into that later on in the program. The Nuggets, like it's weird that you come on the same week the NBA comes back, because Brad, your Nuggets are the defending world champions, in the NBA right now. Nikola Jokic. That what's great about the Nuggets is they run the exact same play every single time down the court. Nobody in the NBA can stop it. What you have been doing this season is running the exact same philosophy in drafting and team management. And I would say nobody could stop it, but a few people have. You're still up at the top of the leaderboard right now. Congratulations to you. This is fantastic for you to see yourself at the end of October in the top 15 in the FFPC main event. Before we get into how successful a fantasy player you are, tell us what you're doing for a living when you are not living at the top of the leaderboard for a $1 million grand prize.
Yeah, so I'm actually a CPA. So I have my own accounting and tax office. Got about 10 employees. I think right now I have 9, looking for the 10th. So real exciting day job. I crunch numbers all day, and then I come home and I crunch some more numbers in a different, avenue, but a lot of numbers.
Ferrell has always been a number and stats guy. Like when you were a kid, did stats appeal to you? Like everybody's talking about, did you see that great play that Michael Jordan did last night? And he's averaging 26.3 points a game. Was that you? Were you that kid?
Always.
I love that. Yep.
I think that's
great. I think it's great.
Yeah, I still joke. Like, I'm more likely to remember your phone number than your name. You tell me your phone number once, I'll remember it. But your name, that might take me, 5 or 6 times of talking to you. So
Balky said we're going to talk about other things than the draft tonight, and but I can't. I'm still emotionally and physically located at Planet Hollywood, drafting live. Were you there?
I was not. No.
Okay. All right. Well, the next year's next. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, and through you on your team, you and I share a player that I have great affinity for, and I couldn't believe that he continued to be the same Bart throughout the draft. And lots of fantasy players that I have deep respect for were modestly impressed by this player. They would kind of shrug their shoulder, and that's why I think he ended up being in the 7th round, and that's Michael Pittman. There have been some strange games with the Indianapolis Colts this year, but Pittman is already on a pace to essentially meet what he did last year as he flirted with 100 catches. Now we have Minshew, who sometimes throws the ball 15 times a game and sometimes throws the ball 55 times a game. Pittman is an every week start in my lineup. Is he for you, and do you think that he will get to the 100 catches that, for a 7th round? I don't know when you got him in most of your drafts. Maybe Balky could tell us where he ended up, but I think he was always available in the 7th round. That's where I got him. And if I can get 100 catches out of the 7th round, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah, I think I picked him up in the 7th or 8th round. Most of the time he was the 30 to 35th wide receiver off the board. And I think that's good value at that spot. I do like his chances of getting to 100 catches. And honestly, I think Minshew, maybe helps that case a little bit. Now, he's a little bit more erratic of a passer. I think Richardson was still a little bit of an unknown. They like to run the ball a lot with him. Mm-hmm. And so the volume was the biggest question in my mind coming into the season. And I still think it's going to be erratic, with Minshew. Just the last, 3 weeks, I think it's 7 targets, 14 targets, and 5 targets, and so you sort of see I think that's going to continue. I mean, there's going to be weeks you're glad you have him, and other weeks you wonder why you played him. But at the same time, he's going to be hard to take out of a lineup.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that's the thing to look at too. Like we look at this player, a guy that was drafted significantly higher than maybe what we would have thought, given that he is dealing with a backup quarterback for the remainder of the season. But at the same time, he is going to be targeted. He is talented. He is not being, well, we'll get into his threats for targets later on in the program tonight for sure. But Michael Pittman is a guy that it may feel weird to start him going forward, but just because it feels weird, it doesn't mean it's the wrong play. And I am with you. I think Michael Pittman is a guy that you more often than not have to find a way to get in your starting lineups. Now, I want to talk, and this is a sort of a wide scoping question here, Brad. Tyreek Hill was dealing with an injury, so we've been told earlier in the week. Tua Tagovailoa in his media session in Tuesday or Wednesday, can't remember which day it was talking about, yeah, man, I can't imagine being without Tyreek Hill. Like, we really want to get him back sometime down the road. And, like, alarm bells were going off in my mind, like, okay, I got to figure out what I'm doing without Tyreek Hill this week because there's no way he's playing. Now, fast forward to Friday afternoon. We're doing the show Friday night. He's active. He's not even on the injury report. He's going to be playing this week. Which is great. Like, and I think a lot of your concerns with what you're going to do with Tyreek Hill were alleviated knowing that he is going to play this week. My question to you is, flashback to the draft. What were you doing after you took Tyreek Hill in the first round? Did that sort of change your philosophy and change your approach on quarterback, knowing that you could wait and get Tua Tagovailoa and stack him with Tyreek Hill? Did the fact that you got Hill in the first round change that, or was Tagovailoa the right guy at the right time in this draft for you?
Well, my general philosophy is I try not to take quarterbacks before the 7th or 8th round. It's just generally the way I draft. There's exceptions to that. I have a lot of teams, probably more than I should have. I had back surgery this summer, and I'd spent a lot of time in bed with nothing else to do but fantasy drafts. So, but generally when I saw Hill, who was my favorite pick at 4, it was always, as long as the first 3 went as expected, Hill was always my preference at 4. And I knew I could get to a late, he was going late, and pairing him with Hill was always my option. But I can't say it really changed anything, because really Tua and Deshaun Watson, were probably my 2 highest owned quarterbacks. Now, Deshaun, probably not as good luck with that so far, because of injuries and not playing. But Tua's paid off very well. So I can't really say it changed anything, but certainly my eyes lit up when you can get Tua, Tyreek in the first, knowing that you can pair him with the quarterback and is so late in the draft, which allows you to stack other positions.
I like that strategy. I like that strategy a lot. The Balky and I were kicking around an idea. Well, wait a minute. We got a numbers guy on the show, Balky. I got to go. Last night, Thursday night game, you watched it?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay. Well, at the very end, trailing by 8, Tampa scored, and they elected to go for 2 points, which would have left them trailing by 8 or trailing by 6. I think the ball bounced off something from the Buffalo Bills, and K-Dot and caught it, if I remember correctly. Was that the right move?
Probably not the move I would have made.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. That's what. Okay. So Balky and I were kicking around this running back situation at Cleveland. And my football answer was, don't try to work these guys in against Seattle, because it doesn't really matter, because Seattle has blanketed a rushing attack, especially when it's a questionable passing attack. Can you give us a better description, or are we wrong perhaps, of the Pierre Strong, Jerome Ford, and Kareem Hunt?
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, prior to the Ford news, when it looked like he was going to be out, Hunt seemed like a good play just because the volume was going to be there. And I know I have Strong on several lineups. I kind of picked him up as a stash play just in case. Running backs tend to drop like flies, and so trying to foreshadow who might be, the waiver wire ad of the week 3 or 4 weeks down the road doesn't always pan out, but that's normally the way I'm looking at the waiver wire, is not who's in demand right now. It's who might be, 3 or 4 weeks down the road, which is why he's sitting on my bench. But now with the Ford news that he may in fact play, I mean, I don't know what to do with that backfield. I don't think I'll touch it this week.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, tough D and uncertain touch distribution means, stay away if you can, at least in my mind.
Excuse me. Brad, you have been playing fantasy football for a long time. To me, as a guy who has Jerome Ford in, I don't know, not double-digit leagues, but pretty close to that, I was rooting for him to be held out this week. So the decision was not going to be forced upon me. Cleveland would make the decision for me. He's out. You can't play him this week. Now I don't know. I think you have to have a certain amount of discipline here and understand that even if Ford is active, the temptation is there to play him, but the smart call is probably to sit him. Again, based on what you have on your roster, you may not have a better option, but my inclination, even though I own Ford in a lot of spots, I think you want to sit him and see what happens this week so you can make an informed decision in week 9, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think the probabilities of outcomes of what may happen, he could be active, play 2 snaps, and realize the ankle's not ready. And I think that's just as likely as having a strong game, if not more likely. And to me, the right decision is not playing him, even if that ends up backfire. Sometimes the right decision leads to a bad outcome. That doesn't mean it was the wrong decision. And I think not playing Ford, like you said, as long as you have other viable options, is the path this week.
I think trusting the process, trusting the process and not necessarily the outcome is what we want to look for here. You could make the same case for not a running back, but wide receiver. I want to ask you about in Jonathan Mingo, a player that we thought, I shouldn't say we, but a lot of people thought, and I'll lump myself into this, that stood a decent chance of being the number 1 receiver in Carolina for Bryce Young this year. That didn't happen. It's Adam Thielen, and it's Adam Thielen by a landslide right now in Carolina. But when you look at Jonathan Mingo, given the fact that this guy's a rookie, given the fact that some of these guys will start off slow, but the light will turn on, it'll start clicking for them at the end of October, early November, is Mingo a guy that you want to keep on your roster because he could end up being a flex in the second half of the season? Or is Mingo's 2023 kind of a wash? It's lost. You want to focus on him for 2024. How do you handle Jonathan Mingo for redraft leagues this year when you look at the type of talent and output he's bringing to the table, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, in honesty, he's been one of the toughest decisions on all of my team, because I was in that camp. I thought everything kind of aligned for him to have a big, rookie year. And for whatever reason, in my mind, I was ready to write off, Adam Thielen. Yeah, that has turned out to be completely backwards. But I don't know that I will drop him. I mean, I think you hold on to him as long as you can on your bench. I mean, there's a number of factors as the season goes on and he gets more accustomed to the offense and things start clicking. Maybe he starts being more productive. Bryce Young, also a rookie quarterback who right now seems to want to throw the ball just to Adam Thielen, a third of the time, roughly. I mean, it's constantly feed it to Adam Thielen. And hopefully as he starts getting more comfortable and the game slows down, maybe he starts seeing the field better. A lot of maybes in there, but I think the talent is there, and I just don't want to release that guy and live to regret it in week 11, week 12. So I'm going to hold on to him personally as long as I can justify the roster spot, which probably depends on the size of the bench, in some leagues. So certainly not somebody you can stick in your lineup with any level of confidence right now, but I want to hold on to him.
That makes sense, especially with that quarterback. Okay, well then let's talk about a rookie receiver where you can truly see the tracks of your tiers, because anytime you get involved with the Arizona Cardinals, drinking and self-doubt and disappointment soon follow. But I was intrigued by Stanford wide receiver Michael Wilson. This player interested me. Now, I thought he had a lack of production in college. He reminds me physically of our pal Pittman. He's got that size and he's agile and can move with it. But I was a little surprised that this team drafted him. I was a little disappointed that this team drafted him. What do you think about this player? Because I think you have him rostered in a couple places. 6'2", 230. There's just a lot of gray area in his game. What are your thoughts moving forward now that the quarterback is headed back to his rightful starting position soon?
Well, once I got over my knee-jerk reaction to cut him from every team after he torched my Niners for the best game of the year, and the emotional.
He was going home, Stanford versus Niners.
Yeah, I was like, you can't be on any of my lineups. But I fought the urge. I didn't do it. I just wanted to. But in all seriousness, I really like the player. I think that the opportunities have been there. I mean, I believe he's second in target share right now behind Marquise Brown. I'm trying to blank on his name for a minute. See, tell you his number, but not his name. Mm-hmm. I think the return of Kyler Murray, which should lead to higher quality targets, a little bit better offense efficiency overall, should help him. And he's a player I could really see having maybe top 30 second half of the year, where you could be very pleased with him heading into fantasy playoffs late in the year. Obviously, a lot of things have to align, but he's another young receiver that wasn't thrilled with his landing spot either. He was one of my sleepers heading into draft season. If you look through all of my, teams in those late teen rounds, I have a lot of shares of Michael Wilson.
Where you could have got Adam Thielen, I point out.
I know, Thielen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Adam Thielen. I agree with you. It's just, a lot of people.
I know. The two, this quick side note, the two receivers that I kicked myself the most for, one for drafting and one for not drafting.
Oh, I know what's coming. I know what's coming.
And I'm drawing a blank on his name now in Washington.
What's his number?
McLaurin? Yeah, Curtis Samuel?
No.
Puka.
He was a rookie last year.
Oh, rookie last year.
In
Why am I drawing a blank on his name?
For the Commanders?
Yeah.
Not Dotson, right?
Dotson, yes.
Yeah, everybody's drawing a blank on Dotson. You know what? And Brad, this quarterback's forgotten who he is too, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. We need to explore this a little bit right now. Brad, why you would regret, because you will be the first person this season to come on the show and say you regret not drafting enough of Jahan Dotson.
He regrets drafting Dotson.
Okay, perfect.
Why are you trying to keep up?
I regret not drafting Thielen. I drafted way too much of Dotson. I had high hopes for him.
It's a live podcast. You're a broadcast professional. The guest is trying to keep up.
You are not alone then, Brad. You are not alone. There are plenty of people, myself included, that have drafted way too much Jahan Dotson this season. And it is what it is. We'll see what happens the second half of the season. It's a long season. We'll see what happens. I want to ask you a couple of questions from the chat that is going on right now. So number one, this is coming from, I believe, Hudson Kern-Reeve, and I have to scroll up here for this one. Nope, that's not it. My apologies on this. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do this. Trevor Holt, a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago, KFFSC royalty. He wants to know, is Josh Downs more valuable than Michael Pittman right now, knowing that Anthony Richardson is going to be on the shelf for the remainder of the 2023 season and Gardner Minshew is going to be throwing the ball? Would you rather have Downs more than Pittman? And I guess, quite frankly, Brad, this factors into what you're doing with starting and benching these guys going forward, starting this week. Like Downs had a blowout week in week 7. Pittman got kind of lucky, got that big touchdown against Cleveland. So when you compare Downs to Pittman, is it a little bit closer than a lot of people are assuming at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very close. If I had to pick one every week, which one to start, it's tough. It's a tough call. I like Pittman, a little bit more experienced, but you can't deny that Downs has been, I could pull up his target distribution, but off the top of my head, I want to think it's been a little bit more consistent than Pittman's even. So I really like Downs as a player. I definitely would not be disappointed to have him. I think by the nature of the way they use him, he's a little bit more boom or bust. They use him a lot on the deep routes, which means, he connects on a couple of those, he's going to have a huge week, or he might put up a 2 catch for 12-yard kind of day. So that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know that there's a clear leader in my mind.
It is a tough one, and this has just become the Pittman show. But Trevor could have called me, and I could have given him the right answer, and then but having it look, we watched Balky and I said, and I may have said it more than Balky when we talked about the Baker Mayfield Tampa Bay Bucks. We said, they're going to take away Evans. It's going to leave Godwin open for everything, and we haven't really seen that this year until Thursday night. That's exactly what they did. And I think that's what we saw in the defense when Downs was available. And, when you have a quarterback like a Minshew and like a Mayfield, and I like Minshew a little better, but that's a whole nother conversation. You try to roll that safety to the number one receiver, take him away, and Downs is open. And not everybody's going to do that. So if you can get into the head of what the DC is going to do for the upcoming opposition, you got your answer. But guys, play the best player, and Pittman is the best player. Downs a good player, good rookie player. Pittman is by far the best player. Trevor, what are you thinking about? Goodness gracious.
Well, yes. And, Trevor.
Who's a guest of the show, too.
I was just going to say, you got Ferrell, direct message on text, although we appreciate you chiming in on the show. Seriously. Yes. Yeah, thank you, Trevor. We appreciate that. Brad, another question here in Hudson Kern-Reeve, our resident Ivy League professor here tonight, chiming in about Jameson Williams. And this is an interesting play because I think a lot of people were excited about drafting Jameson Williams at the start of the season, given how depressed his value was. And now you consider the fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown is unquestionably the number one receiver, regardless of what's been going on with that Detroit offense this year. And Sam Laporta has stepped up in a big-time way to be the unquestioned number 2 receiver there. Still have Jahmyr Gibbs. When you look at Jameson Williams, a guy that Dan Campbell has talked about when he was asked about the evolution of Jameson Williams and how fast he's going to get up to speed, I'm paraphrasing here, but Campbell said something to the effect of everybody adjusts in their own way, right? Everybody adjusts at their own speed. Obviously saying that Williams is adjusting at a slower speed than maybe a lot of other first-round picks here. When you consider Jameson Williams on a 12-team, 20-man roster like the FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship, is he worth keeping around to see if he does show anything by the championship round, by the league playoffs? Is he worth keeping around at this point, Brad?
Oh, man. The answer for me is no. That I could be wrong, but to me, I think next year is the year, assuming he can stay out of trouble for once, and actually be on the field. But I have a hard time believing in him this year. I think that their offense is pretty well established right now with who the targets are going to, how they're running, the offense and the weapons that they do have. I just have a hard time seeing him crack that, barring injury, of course. Somebody goes down, that can change the whole landscape. But I don't think this is the year for him, in my opinion.
I think the other thing too is to understand about Jameson Williams is there is a reason that the majority of FFPC players and Fantasy Pros Championship players stayed away from him. There is a reason his value depressed, and we are seeing it at this point in the FFPC main event in the Fantasy Pros Championship. That you want to keep him around, okay, that's fine. You're doing it at your own risk, and it might be to the detriment of the rest of your team going forward. So that's where we're at with Jameson Williams right now. Let's touch on the Vikings backfield here, Brad, because what we saw on Monday night was some pretty interesting things. Number one, the 49ers are not God, and they can be beat not once, but back-to-back weeks, which is what we saw. Cleveland last week, Minnesota this week. The Vikings running game, which was rated, I don't know, the worst in the NFL, but pretty damn close to being the worst in the NFL. We saw Cam Akers take this rushing offense to a new level, catching the ball, rushing the ball. He looked a lot better than Alexander Mattison. When you consider your teams, and I don't know what your distribution is with Alexander Mattison and Cam Akers right now, but when you consider the state of the running game and the Minnesota Vikings going forward, especially against the Packers, one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL, what do you do with Cam Akers this week? What do you do with Alexander Mattison this week? I think a lot of people will just be playing Mattison because of the matchup, but man, Akers is throwing a monkey wrench into this problem right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both playable this week against that, not so great rushing defense. I think the distribution is probably going to continue to tilt more towards Akers as we move down the road. I mean, when the deal first happened, that's immediately what I thought. I tried to acquire as much of Akers as I could. When I watch Madison, I see, and this is the eye test, just what I see, a very good complementary back. I think he's done really well in that limited role, 35% touch distribution, stepping in when somebody goes down. He hasn't done so well. His efficiency is really low as the main guy. He fumbles the ball, which I think is partially what led to them going out and trying to acquire. Is early in the season, he couldn't hold on to the ball. That's slowed down now. I mean, he seems to have slowed that down a little bit, but he's not a very explosive player. I mean, I know Cam Akers fell out of favor in LA for whatever reason. They had their problems there. He needed to change the scenery. And I think when we look back on this and in, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, we're probably going to see a 70-30, 65-35 in the favor of Akers. Touch distribution. I just don't know how quickly it's going to get there. I think it's going to be a slow build to get to that end result.
Let me ask you this just real quick, Brad. And I want to go to the YouTube chat here, and I have a follow-up question on what you were just talking about. So, number one, Chris Lude, our good buddy here, wants to know if you would play Josh Downs this week over Tank Dell. Now, Tank Dell, from all reports, I don't know if he's cleared concussion protocol, but it's basically a formality at this point that this dude is going to be out there against the Carolina Panthers this week. Josh Downs has been crushing it. He's looked very, very good in full PPR formats. Would you, Brad Whitten, play Josh Downs over Tank Dell this week? Josh Downs, of course, going up against the New Orleans Saints this week. Who would you start?
Oh, Tank Dell. To me, I mean, that's a pretty easy one in my opinion. I'm a big fan of Tank Dell, though. I mean, I think he's a great talent. I love that matchup, considerably more. And we don't know exactly how New Orleans is going to play those receivers or, how they're going to, approach their defensive game plan. But give me some Tank Dell. I love that kid. I think he's super talented, and that matchup is great. The biggest problem Tank Dell has, in my opinion, is Nico Collins, the receiver on the other side of the ball, and who they're going to throw it to any given week. So
let's do this, Brad. Here, another question from Sean Jensen in the YouTube chat. This is a little bit closer. I think this is a tougher call. Who do you guys like better? Christian Kirk this week, who is going to be going up against the Steelers in Pittsburgh, or Jacoby Myers, who gets a matchup against the Detroit Lions in the Motor City. Now, if you look at the stats over the course of the season, the Steelers have had a lot of difficulty stopping wide receivers this year. Now, if you look back at last week, Steelers versus Rams, they did a fantastic job on Cooper Kupp. 2 catches, 3 catches, whatever, for less than 40 yards was great. But Puka Nacua had like 8 for 150 plus. So for me, Brad, and you answer this the way that you will, I think Christian Kirk is the number 1 receiver for Jacksonville. I think he's going to crush it for targets this week. And I think he is the correct play over Jacoby Myers this week. If you only had one roster spot available between Kirk and Myers, who would you play?
I think I agree with you. It's Kirk this week. I think there's a big narrative problem, on the Raiders. I think that they want to try to force feed Devontae Adams the ball. He's not been quiet about his displeasure of targets, and right or wrong, I think that's going to factor in at least in the short term. I think in the long term that evens out, but. Historically, when a star receiver gripes for touches, the next week or two, you sort of see a force feed of the ball in their direction, right or wrong. And I do agree that Kirk is really the number 1. Now, maybe it's Ridley still shaking off some rust and needs a little bit more time to round out or whatever, but just haven't been. I was really impressed by his workout videos in the preseason and the, short clips that we got to see of Ridley, but his game tape is not looking as good. So I would definitely lean towards Kirk.
That was the biggest gimme question, Balky, of all history. Kirk.
What do you want me to say? It's
Kirk is an every week
chat.
start, for goodness sakes. I mean, and he was a steal in the draft. Everybody said, "Oh no, Ridley's going to come in and steal." Kirk is over. There was something about, hey, Kirk can't run out of the slot. Now that he's in the slot, he's not going to be productive. It's the biggest bunch of nonsense I've ever heard. Now, here's how you answer this question, Balky. Dom, you came onto the show as a Dom. Brad, you came. I'm reading about Dom here and there. Dom's got a lot of good input here. But Brad, you came onto the show as a significant backer of Pittman. Then somehow we twisted Downs getting in front of that. Then I think we got Tank Dell in front of him. I'm not sure where we're going to end up. So before we get you down any more crazy paths of wide receivers, tell us what is within your 14th place team, your most difficult decision, how the Brad Whitten mind works. What is your most difficult decision in this week 8, where Balky reminds us that no teams are on bye and your roster is full of talented players? What's your tough move?
I don't know that any. In all honesty, I think the flex with Pittman is my most difficult
Pittman
decision.
Show. It's a Pittman show. Yeah.
But it's not that hard. I mean, he's going in. He's not budging. I just have a hard time taking him out of my lineups. But, for the most part, right or wrong, I have my process. I go through and I pick my lineups, and I really don't, get too caught up in tough decisions. Now, maybe some of that is how my teams are constructed as well. The way that I draft is pretty similar. And I think when you look at my team construction, the worst teams that I have that are, so far through this season are teams when I tried to, throw a wrench in my process and say, I'm tired of all my lineups looking similar. I'm going to try something different. And then it backfires. And those are the ones that, don't look good. So, but, I do think given the matchup, given the quarterback, and given the rise of Downs, Pittman is a tough week-to-week call. But like I said earlier, he's a guy I don't think I'll ever end up taking out. I think I'll ponder it time and time again. But when it's all said and done, he's going to be in my flex.
Pondering in Denver. The greatest lineup the Nuggets ever had, by the way.
Oh,
what's that?
Can I guess? Can I guess? I want to guess.
Go ahead.
Kiki Vandeweghe and Alex English and the other three guys.
Those guys could play, but the greatest play that the Denver Nuggets ever had that really put them on the map was guard Louis Dampier of Kentucky throwing the ball to Dan Issel of Kentucky.
Oh, Dan Issel.
So Issel and Dampier, both of which who live here in Kentucky and around Louisville. Now, those guys years ago found out how to get from Louisville to Denver. So I want to tell Brad Whitten, you can figure out how to get from Denver to Louisville and play in the KFFSC. You can wear your hat backward. You can settle in and talk your numbers. You don't have to know anybody's name because we produce a name tag, which will handle that for you. You should come here and play because you are an excellent guy, and I will be looking for you to draft Pittman before the 7th round when you get here.
Sounds good to me, except maybe the Pittman before the 7th. I don't know about that one, but
So and Ferrell, the other thing that's important to remember, Issel actually coached the Nuggets too after his playing days were over. Dan Issel, a legend, not only in Colorado but obviously Kentucky as well. I don't have any emails right now that I am seeing in the inbox for Brad tonight. So I'm going to let you go into your last question, Ferrell. And I know, and I apologize, we made an amendment to this question last week. We were going to keep it positive, and I forgot to change it in the rundown. But I know you, being the broadcast professional that you are, you will keep this question completely positive for Brad Whitten tonight.
The question is, how soon can you get to Kentucky? No, Brad, wait. The question, and I think it needs to have both polar ends of it.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be on your roster. It has to be any player in football. Any player in football, and we can't already have talked about him, especially Michael Pittman. Give me the guy that is your go-to guy this week, and give me the sleeper that is your go-to guy, and then give me a guy that you just will not have in your roster. Can't be the Dawson kid from the Foreskins. It's got to be someone that we haven't talked about. A guy you won't touch. And a guy that you really, really love.
Well, a guy that I really love this week, Ferguson, the tight end in Dallas.
Okay.
I'm really high on him. I think, he had a bad game against the Niners, but that's a tough, matchup for tight ends. And then the following week, I think it was the Chargers, but he ran the most routes he had run all year and saw, one of the, I don't know if it was the fewest targets, but it was one of. So I think a lot of people are off of him right now. But I think, the Rams are not good. I think they allow the 9th most points to tight ends. And that offense needs a jolt coming out of the bye week. And if you watch the tape, he's running open, fairly frequently. So I think they find him this week. And he'll definitely be loaded up, even in some flex spots in leagues that I have him, especially in tight end premium leagues. I think he's a really good play. Now, a guy that I don't know if I can say I won't touch him just because of where he was drafted. But DK Metcalf, pretty low on him this week, coming off the injury. And, Cleveland, very strong defense who kind of had a letdown last week. Ended up in a shootout with the Colts. And I know they're on the road, but I think, they're going to be looking to get right this week after a tough defensive performance. And that pass rush, can be brutal. So I'm not a huge fan of DK Metcalf. Like I said, it's going to be hard not to play just because of the draft capital that, he comes with. So he'll probably end up in a few of my lineups, but not too high on him this week.
What's interesting is I know you are not alone in this and being down on Metcalf a little bit. Not to the point where, hey, everybody's all aboard on the Tyler Lockett train or the JSN train or anything like that. But I know there are a few people down on DK Metcalf this week. Now, that could represent an opportunity for people that are watching this show and are listening to it prior to 1 o'clock on Sunday that maybe I need to get DK Metcalf in my lineup to try to create some separation. I don't know how much you're going to do that in the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship. But I know that, even me, I don't own Metcalf in a ton of leagues, but I do own him in a few. And Brad, when I look at him this week, he's not a slam dunk start that he has been in early September, late September. I'm thinking hard and long about this, and I think you might have shifted the tides on whether I played DK Metcalf this week for sure. And who better to take advice from, ladies and gentlemen, than the 14th place team owner in the FFPC main event, a guy that is gunning for a 7-figure grand prize, looking for that $1 million payday coming up in early January. Brad, cannot thank you enough for hopping aboard tonight. So much fun, very informative, very entertaining, as we like to keep it on this show. You failed to disappoint. You were awesome.
Oh, you were
we wish you the best of luck. May the ball bounce your way in week 8 and going forward. We will continue to follow you on the X machine at Brad Whitten CPA. Thank you so much for hopping aboard tonight, dude. Be good.
Yeah, thanks, guys. A lot of fun. So
It was a pleasure. Brad Whitten, the 14th place team owner in the FFPC main event. Wow, what a guy! As we move forward with the show, and we're already after 11 o'clock Eastern time tonight, Ferrell. So we got to fly through this the best we can.
Can we just go over and say we did?
No, we can't. I want to help out. I want to help out the people.
Let's help out the people. Well, now I've been helped out tremendously by Dominic tonight. And I got to point this out here. Hudson Kern Reed said something that I don't understand, which usually puts me into research mode. But Dominique says, I agree, Hudson. So whenever I don't understand what Kern Reed is saying, that's just what you do. You just say, I agree with that. Yeah, that's right.
That's true. Yeah. What can you do? Agree with the Ivy League guy. It is what it is.
That's right.
Jim.
I also agree with that Ferguson thing. I thought that was a very, very good answer.
Yeah, it's true.
To what is sort of a off the wall question. Okay, I'll be quiet.
No, you don't have to be quiet because I need you to talk here.
Okay.
Jim in San Diego, California has a decision this week in the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship. He's only got one roster spot for either Michael Mayer or Trey McBride. Ferrell, I think the easy analysis here, and I'm not saying it's the wrong analysis, is to play Trey McBride, given the fact that Zach Ertz is on IR. There is a non-zero chance, according to Jonathan Gannon, the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals that we heard this afternoon, that Kyler Murray could be in action this week. I don't think it happens this week, but it certainly is possible as we record this on Friday night. Who would you rather play? Michael Mayer, a guy that the Raiders seem insistent on getting involved in the game in the first quarter, and then after that, forgetting about completely, or Trey McBride, a guy who's going to get all the tight end touches for the Cardinals this week because Ertz is out.
Yeah, and he's a second-year player who's coming into his own without being challenged at the position. There's still other tight ends, Hooper, there at the Raiders for a team that, and if you watch the Raiders play Chicago last week and get pummeled by a rookie quarterback, you can't have a lot of confidence in getting too much removed from Jacobs, Myers, and Devontae Adams.
All right, so Kern is piping in here. Just because you sunk a lot of money into something doesn't mean you should deploy it if it does not maximize future payouts, Ferrell. So a couple of things to point out on this.
But how is it tied to the Concorde? I get that, but the Concorde. What's he talking about the Concorde? Is he talking about the airplane? What was he talking about there? I don't know. Concorde.
What's crazy is I was up in Green Bay this afternoon, right by the Austin Straubel Airport, where all the teams flying in, like the Minnesota Vikings, who are taking on the Packers this weekend. And they had the jets, like the fighter jets, flying off doing like test runs or whatever today. And Ferrell, I've never seen this before, where the jets are flying off above my head. And you always talk about the sound barrier. I see them fly above my head. I'm like, God, I thought it'd be louder. Boom. 4 seconds later, whoosh, like it was insane. Like it was crazy. Everybody outside the sports book in Green Bay where I was at, like everybody had their phones out. They were recording. It was absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like it before. I'll tell you another thing I've never seen in recent memory before is a guy like CJ Stroud, the guy who was drafted the second overall pick in the NFL draft in 2023, just absolutely crushing it this year and turning it on. Ferrell, remember his preseason? Everybody was so down on this guy. They said he's not going to put it together this year, maybe ever. And he is the de facto rookie of the year front runner right now. He has looked awesome so far. I said on the Better Sports Network last night on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, you could make a strong case for starting him this week against the Carolina Panthers over Joe Burrow, who is taking on the San Francisco 49ers this week on the left coast. I think there is a case to be made for C.J. Stroud not being a slam dunk starter this week, but a guy that you should strongly look at as probably starting over, again, players like Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and to this emailer's question here, he has the situation, does Joe in Montgomery, Alabama, Matthew Stafford or C.J. Stroud?
Oh.
I'm saying Stroud here against the Panthers over Stafford. What say you, Ferrell?
That's an easy one. The Rams travel to Dallas with the Cowboys coming off of a bye week. That defense primed and ready to go. All right, to more importantly, C.J. Stroud. Yes, he's playing behind an offensive line that's coming together and playing better every day. After 3 to 4 week point of the season, you and I talked about how he was developing with the tight end, and the tight end now has, I think, in FFPC scored 17 and 20 in the last 2 weeks. The fact that he lets the long strider Collins develop into the routes and get downfield is the fact that he's playing in a clean pocket. If you watch the game against almost every team, he's basically settled and very, very comfortable. He goes through the progressions and he reads very well. Our guest, Mr. Whitten, is correct that Tank Dell would be an excellent start because I think Stroud throws 3 touchdowns this week. If you look at Carolina, they cannot pressure the ball, and they just lost my favorite player on that defense to injured reserve, Jeremy Shin, number 21, Mr. Whitten, Chin. Let's really like C.J. Stroud, and let's start him over everybody after Herbert. Draw the line under Herbert and start him over everybody else.
I mean, there's so much to love about C.J. Stroud this week that I think that, and it's a weird week, Ferrell. We don't have anybody on bye. Brock Purdy is really the only guy in injury consideration this week. But my God, Stroud is such a good start this week, and not a lot of people are going to be playing him, especially if you're trying to make up ground in the FFPC main event, the FantasyPros Championship, the KFFSC main event. Stroud is a good way to do it this week because not a lot of people are going to be playing him for sure. So I am with you 100% on that. Let's go to, let's see, who are we going to here with this question on Madison or Pierce? It is, no, that's not it. No, God, I can't read it. John in Humboldt, Minnesota. I'm sorry, John. My apologies on this. So he's got a question here. He's got Alexander Madison going up against Packers in Lambeau, or he could play Dameon Pierce from the Texans, a guy who a lot of people have been frustrated with, a lot of people who have drafted him high. I know I drafted him high in a couple of leagues. I've been disappointed this year. You love playing Madison this week because of the low-ranked Packers rushing defense. But you got to consider a couple of things with Madison. The rise of Akers from what we saw on Monday night and the fact that the Vikings seem to be on the come-up a little bit. And Dameon Pierce, a guy who is ceding touches to Devin Singletary this week. What say you, Ferrell? Who would you play this week? Would you play Alexander Madison against the Green Bay Packers, or are you rolling with Dameon Pierce on the road against the lowly Carolina Panthers?
This decision makes me want to tell the Humboldt Flash that in 2024, the FFPC will be drafting at Planet Hollywood the weekend after Labor Day because we need to already start planning for next year. Boy, I hate this situation, but Pierce is my obvious choice here. He's going to cut loose when the Texans can get ahead on the road. They're going to attempt to shorten this game, and Pierce is going to be the key to that. So that is the easy play. Boy, Madison looked good early in the start of last week's game, but yeah, let's go with Pierce.
You're going to go with Pierce. I'm going to go with Pierce as well because I loved what I see from Cam Akers when I was watching that game on Monday Night Football. So I think that Pierce is the right play here. The final question, and we touched on this a little bit, and Ferrell, this is going to test your mettle on how strong you feel about Josh Downs here.
Okay.
This is a question that we are receiving right now from Ray. No, not Ray. It is Ray. I apologize. Ray in Long Beach, California. He is asking right now, what do we think about this starting matchup this week between Josh Downs, who we talked about several times tonight, Josh Downs, who is going up against the New Orleans Saints in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium, or his other option here is DeAndre Hopkins, who is at home against the Arthur Smith-led Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, and we thank you for the email. Obviously, like on the surface, you're like, okay, well, you're playing Hopkins over Downs for sure. But the last few weeks, man, Downs has been really good. And I don't know what's going to happen with Hopkins this week, given the fact that we don't have Ryan Tannehill. We're going to have Malik Willis and Will Levis, maybe a combination of the two, maybe one or the other. Either way, it's a downgrade from Tannehill. What do you think? Is Downs good enough to start over Hopkins this week?
When you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, Balky, and Hopkins has not been doing well with any of the quarterbacks there in Tennessee. And it's difficult to put a player like that on the Pines, but you know what? Josh Downs, this will be a difficult matchup. The Colts will have to pace New Orleans, which is, you know, what New Orleans is getting done between the 20s is if they can ever get it worked out in the red zone, they're going to score a lot of points. Yeah, I'm probably going to go with Downs in this game. It has nothing to do with Hopkins, has everything to do with the quarterback that play that we'll see in Tennessee. And maybe Derrick Henry throws 4 or 5 passes.
Yes, that's the other. Now the question is he going to get on the field over Tyjae Spears to throw those passes?
Well, there's a lot of there's a lot of rumors about trades of various players coming out of Tennessee. Our friend Rand Carthon will have a very interesting weekend.
Now, are you friends with Rand Carthon? You say our friend. I'm not friends with him.
You're friends with everybody, Buck. You're actually beloved. Rand's father, Maurice, who played for the Giants, Maurice roomed with a client of mine named Rick Fishback, and we were all pals. And I can remember Rand when he was running around in diapers. But yeah, we've done a little bit of business over the years. You know, he's part of that 49er tree.
Yeah, and, he is.
You know, he knows what he's doing. That Tennessee team's going to look better in the future than it looks today.
The victory that we are purporting to you tonight is everything you could imagine here for your Week 8 lineups have been answered. Every question you possibly could think of has been answered, except for maybe
Roderick.
I was going to say, except for one, Ferrell. There's one question we haven't answered tonight.
Sorry.
And we're going to go with Roderick Dobson's question here. What do you think of Alec Pierce as a sleeper wide receiver with Gardner Minshew at quarterback? My answer to this, and I'm not trying to be harsh on this, Roderick. What do I think about Alec Pierce this week? Not much. Yes, he is a sleeper. Is he a sleeper that gets woken up? I'm not so sure. I think you should be looking elsewhere other than Alec Pierce this week. I think it's fun to start him, but man, Ferrell, I'm not seeing the return here.
Your one expectation about this team is that they have no viable receiving consistent tight end. So you think a big player like Pierce over the middle would get some action. However, we'll end the show on Pittman, who runs the same type of crossing routes that Pierce does. But Pierce is if you have, Mr. Roderick, if you are fortunate enough to play in the FFPC and have dynasty teams, Mr. Pierce is a very attractive stash and keep player.
Yeah, I would do that as well. I mean,
and he'll have a bulky. Alec Pierce will have a 20-point game before the season's over.
Yeah, but the question is, when does he do it?
Yeah, it's like on that roulette wheel. I know black is coming, Bulky. I just know it's coming.
But to your point, in 2024, that roulette wheel with Alec Pierce will be easier to read.
Yeah.
Like we'll figure things out with Alec Pierce going forward. We'll figure things out going forward after Week 8, which is going to be underway here on Sunday morning. No London game, no Germany game. It's going to be great. No, it's not a disappointment.
I like those early morning games.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'll say this, and I don't want to, because we're way over right now, but I'll say this. Yeah. I like, from a football fan standpoint, I love the fact that I can go to church on Sunday morning. I can get home. I can dial up whatever London game is going on, and as a result, I can watch NFL football for basically 14 hours on the day. It's fantastic. Now, the problem is when you have two teams or even one team playing in Europe early and I have to make early lineup decisions, I don't like that, Ferrell, at all. 100%, I do not like that. And if it's two bad teams that I don't have to concern myself with, okay, that's fine. And then I love watching the games, obviously. So from a NFL fan standpoint, I love it. From a fantasy football standpoint, I'm not upset to not be able to see it this weekend for sure.
If it's anything like last weekend, I just may go out to the airport and look at the planes.
Ferrell Elliott is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. You check out the KFFSC at kffsc.com, the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Ferrell, I don't know if you noticed this. I might be having my best season ever in the KFFSC.
You've been impressive, sir.
It's been good so far. I know I don't want to jinx it. It's been good so far. Long season to go, and I'm excited to do it. I love playing it. I love playing the KFFSC. I know everybody else loves playing the FFPC, and hopefully we helped you with your lineups tonight. Ferrell, be good. We will talk with you again 1 week from today.
See you then, buddy.
Ferrell Elliott, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. You follow him on the X, KFFSC official. Of course, check out the KFFSC at kffsc.com, including all the great leagues and the party that he is going to have for the big game Sunday coming up in February. Plenty of 2024 drafts going off that day. And you can check out the Super Bowl live from the Caesar Sportsbook in Southern Indiana. It's going to be a lot of fun. That is going to complete tonight's show. I want to thank Brad Whitten, Ferrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for watching. We will be back next week at 10 o'clock Eastern time with another great guest getting you set for week 9 of the FFPC main event, Fantasy Pros Championship, and all your FFPC fantasy football leagues. In case you missed it, Tuesday's RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown featured 17-time FFPC league winner Ray Chung. You can watch that on any of the FFPC socials via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. It's all on there. You can watch that back. And then, of course, we will return this Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern time with 11th place team owner in the Fantasy Pros Championship, Chris Lajawa. He is going to join me on that program. We're going to talk about week 9, everything you need to know for that. In case you missed it, watch last night's High Stakes Fantasy Football show on the Better Sports Network presented by the FFPC. Again, on any of the Better Sports Network socials, as well as the FFPC socials. We had on Fantasy Football Today's Doug Orth, who one of my favorite guys out there, knows his stuff. He's been playing high-stakes fantasy football for more than 20 years, never had a losing season. You got to love that. So check out that show. This coming Thursday, we will go live again from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. Eastern time. Check that out, too. It's a great lead-in for Thursday Night Football, Fantasy Football Night in America. We get you set for the Thursday night game. We have a lot of fun doing it, including setting you up for the Better Cast on the Better Sports Network during the Thursday Night Football program on Amazon. And you can win a ton of points and tickets towards a lot of great NFL signed memorabilia and collectibles. If you hang out with us on the Bettercast, I've been doing it for basically all season. It's a lot of fun. So check that out. Better Sports Network is where we're at, betternetwork.com. And of course, any of the FFPC socials. Go to myffpc.com to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge in week 8. No draft, no salary cap. Just choose the 10 or 12 players that you want to roll with in week 8. Again, 10 players if you want to play without kickers and defenses, 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. That is going on at myffpc.com. Win up to $2,500, just $35 to enter. And of course, remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified anytime we go live on the FFPC YouTube channel, which will be again Tuesday night at 10 p.m. on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown with Chris Lajawa. Can't wait for that. Hopefully the ball bounces your way in week 8, everybody. Thanks so much for watching, and we will talk with you again on Tuesday night.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Ferrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
You know, I always don't. If you know me, I'm a very positive guy. I want to keep everything positive, and I hate to end the show on a downer. But I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up tonight. One of my best friends from high school, who I spent a ton of time with over my formative years, even after high school, over at his house in Appleton, Wisconsin, Northeast Wisconsin. He lost his mother in a very bizarre sequence of events where she was having chest pains on Monday evening this past week. Got airlifted from Northeast Wisconsin down to Milwaukee for a rare heart defect that she had in her aorta. She was able to say goodbye to her family before she boarded the helicopter down to Milwaukee, but she actually passed away on that helicopter ride. And she was basically kind of a second mom to me growing up, you know, from ages, 13 on, and even into my mid and late 20s, made a huge impact on my life. Tremendous individual, a woman that I think that no matter who she came across, regardless of age or her relationship to them, made an impact, a positive impact on their lives. And we already miss her very, very much. And so I want to give a shout out to her. Jenny Osmond, you are missed already. We love you. And we can't wait to see you again on the other side. Thank you for the impact that you've had on each and every one of our lives. And we will talk with you again at some point in this lifetime or the next. And I would encourage everybody. I know this doesn't make a difference to you because you didn't know her, but she was a tremendous individual. We all have tremendous individuals in our lives. Hug them, kiss them, tell them how much they mean to you going forward, because you never know when that last opportunity is going to come. The ball hopefully will bounce your way in week 8. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll talk with you on Tuesday night. Have a good night. Your weekend starts now.